And he said, okay, I'll invest. And I felt fantastic. This is our first large chunk of capital, seed capital certainly, but real money to help get the company off the ground. And he said, okay, I'd like you to guarantee that my ownership will never be diluted, ever.
Lanford Holloway is with TerraStride, which has one of the best sports performing apps with over 2 million users, 6.5 million downloads. It is ubiquitous for hunters because people that hunt need to know what their boundaries are in the physical location as they're walking around, and you help them do that, right?
That's right.
So what year did you guys start, and how big is it now?
We started in 2013 with about arguably 4 or 5 people. I say arguably because we had a bunch of grad students who were getting their PhDs in computer science that joined, but they were working 10, 15 hours a week. And then now we're at about 21 full-time people.
Unbelievable. So such cool growth and such a good company. But you've done it, though, in a really positive way in helping investors, right? Having investors put in money and then make money for them ultimately is the goal. So help people understand what they need to know in order to go get those investors. It's not an easy task. It's especially not in Columbia, South Carolina, right?
It's not easy. And to some degree, there's a little bit of education even for the investors. There's a story I tell sometimes where we got this guy to say he was going to invest. And he was a very wealthy individual, and I'm sure his net worth is quite high. And we were raising a relatively modest amount of money. I mean, he was into the 6 figures, but the low 6 figures. And he said, okay, I'll invest. And I felt fantastic. This is our first large chunk of capital, seed capital certainly, but real money to help get the company off the ground. And he said, okay, I'd like you to guarantee that my ownership will never be diluted, ever. And again, this is a person who has a lot of business experience. He's closed a lot of multi-million-dollar deals.
Sure.
But I had to explain to him why that was a non-starter. Because at first blush, it makes sense from his perspective. I get that to say I want to own 5% or 10 or whatever it was for forever. But I had to explain, look, if we fix that point, then every additional round that we raise, they're basically going to be funding your percentage as opposed to just, the whole company.
Well, and I think
folks are going to say no to that.
Yeah, of course they're going to say no. And I think too, there's a real struggle in that I know you've seen, that you have to decide what your valuation is. Unless you're always doing convertible notes, you need to at some point decide the valuation. And if you shoot over and you say, oh, we're only worth $100,000, but I'm going to price it at $20 million, then you're going to have investors, but within 2 years, they're going to be really mad. Because they've made no money, right? So now you've got people.
If they say yes to that, which is great if they do, right?
But even if you get them to say yes to a dumb valuation, then you've really hurt them, which later is going to hurt you, right? Because now you're taking a down round. They're mad about it. So how do you gauge that for yourself? Like what your valuation is and how you're going to sell that to them?
Well, that's tricky, Patrick. Like certainly, as you know. And I frequently say that the company valuation is the highest number you can get the investors to agree to. And of course it is, right? But that's the answer. I mean, there's no real scientific way. I mean, if you're an established company, you can start looking at, multiples within that industry or whatever. And that's fine. It's totally reasonable. But, for like a brand new startup, especially one that's, pre-revenue, you're really selling an idea. You're selling a concept, and that can be a tough sell. So honestly, what it comes down to is the highest number you can get the investors to agree to. And so you're doing a sales job, you're selling a concept, and you're hoping that they're buying it, and eventually you reach an equilibrium, and that's your valuation.
I love it. And I think that your mindset on that, you've gone out a couple of times for raises, right?
Yeah. So we raised probably 7 or 8 different times over a 5-year period. Perhaps even more. So we never raised a big tranche of capital. We always did what I call sort of micro rounds. Yeah. We'd raise $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. We would take that, we would run the company, we would grow it. I, of course, would tell the investors what we were going to accomplish with that money. And that money might last us 6 months. It might last us a year and a half, depending on the round. And then I would go back and say, look, last time we raised this, under this valuation. We told you we would accomplish this. We did, and more. And now the company is going to be worth this, which I think is reasonable considering the gain that we had. Would you like to invest some additional in this round? And I'm really happy to say that almost without fail, that most of our investors did invest in every round because they were pleased with the progress that we were making. Yeah. And that's also good because it keeps you from taking a ton of dilution. We never took that massive check, which in some ways would have been nice. It would have made things a lot easier. But we always had to make very financially conscious decisions because we never had enough money, to not make bad decisions.
Right.
Yeah,
well, I'll say that what you built's impressive. The fact that you brought your investors along for the win and the ride is super cool, and I appreciate you coming on Entrepreneur Studio.
Appreciate your having me.
We can't do Entrepreneur Studio without our sponsors. Please support them because they're supporting entrepreneurship.